Okay, it's my pleasure to introduce Michael Kieval, who's going to get the Devar Torah this morning. He's a very learned and active member of our community, active in Minyan Chaverim.
The word is hyperactive.
Very hyperactive in our community, in Minyan Chaverim, in Morning Minyan, and very, very learned. So I'm sure going to enjoy his words this morning. Thank you, Michael.
Shabbat Shalom. The Chazan and I are going to have a word about what it means to underpromise and overdeliver. Thank you to the Chazan and the rabbis and the Kahal for permitting me to say a few words today to try to connect our Torah and Haftarah readings to each other and to this season. Today is Shabbat Chazon. The Shabbat before Tisha B'Av, which is when we commemorate the destruction of the temples in Jerusalem and really most of the tragedies in Jewish history. On Shabbat Chazon, we read the third of the three Haftarot of Pur'anut, usually rendered as admonition, but maybe suffering or retribution, that are read during this 3-week period that we observe between the fast of the 17th of Tammuz and Tisha B'Av, a period that it's known as Bein HaMetzarim, between the straits. In the Midrashic compilation Eicha Rabbah, the rabbis discuss this concept of Bein HaMetzarim, between the straits, and the risks that face the Jewish people during this time of year. They interpret the third verse of Eicha, of Lamentations, and that verse ends, Kol rodefea hisigua bein hametzarim. All her pursuers overtook her in the narrow places. And they explain that Ketev Meriri, which is a dangerous spirit or demon, it may sound a little familiar. It's mentioned in a different context, in a slightly different context in Parashat Ha'azinu. We talk about Ketev more generally in Psalm 91 that we say frequently. It's discussed more in the Talmud and elsewhere in rabbinic literature, but the rabbis say that this Ketev Meriri prevails specifically during this period of the year, and especially at midday. We have this midday evil wind heat something that exists. And a little aside, does anyone know what the deepest division in the Jewish people is? It's not religious and non-religious. It's not, Hasidic and Misnagdim. It's between those who believe in demons and those who say they don't believe in demons. Poo, poo, poo. So there are various implications of this danger, including traditional warnings against undertaking dangerous activities, such as swimming in open water or certain traveling. And as we approach Tisha B'Av, the warnings and restrictions increase, to the point that there is a presumption against starting new projects or making investments during what are called the 9 days between the 1st of Av and through Tisha B'Av, where possible. One traditionally doesn't walk alone in an isolated area. Some advise postponing surgeries that aren't urgent, and this is more in a period where Jews have unequal rights, but not appearing in court against a non-Jewish opponent. The idea is that there is bad luck in the air, bad something, and you should just stay home and sit tight. This week's Haftarah Chazon describes the prophet Isaiah's vision, his vivid prophecy of the destruction that would come and did come in the future, found in the first chapter of the book of Isaiah. You can look in the Eitz Chaim Chumash, in the introduction, it talks about there being 3 different sets of that vision. I'm going to focus mostly on the third, the moral criticism. And now the tradition of reading from this Haftarah in the time leading up to Tisha B'Av is very ancient. The Pesikta de Rav Kahana, which collects drashot from the land of Israel for particular parshiot, reflects what is more or less the 3 Haftarah cycle that we have. And Piska 15, corresponding to the Shabbat before Tisha B'Av, is called Eicha. That's how they title it, Eicha. And most likely this refers not to the book of Eicha, as some editions mistakenly indicate. The Salman Buber, who transcribed a better edition of the Pesikta from manuscripts, is very definitive in how he traces the fact that these were scribal errors. There are reasons to maybe put 10% question on that, but rather it refers to the words that appear toward the end of our Haftarah, which actually form the beginning of the Haftarah according to the Yemenite tradition for this Shabbat. And we read those words, Eicha hayetala zonah kirya ne'emana. How has the faithful town become a whore filled with justice? Mileti mishpat tzedek yalin bah ve'ata meratzchim. It was filled with justice where righteousness did lodge, and now murderers. That's how Robert Alter poetically renders it. Now, the Pesikta records a homily on this verse presented by Rabbi Abahu in the name of Rabbi Yossi Bar Chananya, which compares the exile of Israel from our land, the stages, commandment, violation, exile, and crying out, Eicha, of Adam from the Garden of Eden to the people Israel being exiled from our land. It takes the word Ayeka, where are you? God calls out to Adam, Ayeka. It's the same letters as Eicha, and so he says this is the same word. The Pesikta also records a homiletic discourse of Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Nehemiah, and Rabbi Yehuda said the term Eicha is none other than rebuke, and he cites a verse using Eicha in Jeremiah. And Rabbi Nehemiah says, no, the term Eicha is none other than lamentation, citing 3 verses from the book of Lamentation. We're not going to take sides in that dispute, obviously, today. But I'd like to connect what Rabbi Yehuda says, that Eicha, the term is none other than rebuke, to something in our parsha for this week. So our Torah reading this week is Parashat Devarim. And the Midrash Lachach Tov cites an unlisted Braita for the principle that every place where Devarim were said, any place where words with the word Devarim were said, they are words of rebuke. And so the idea that Rabbi Yehuda says, Ein lashon eicha ela lashon tochacha. Eicha is, the term is none other than rebuke, and the Midrash Hachtov says kol makom shenemru dvarim lashon tochacha hein. Anywhere that the word dvarim is used, it's words of rebuke. This seems to be that we're on a theme. And in fact, the word Eicha itself also appears toward the beginning of our parsha this week, and that's what I'd like to focus on. Eicha esa levadi, torchachem umasachem verivchem. Oh, how can I carry by myself your trouble and your burden and your disputing? Robert Alter calls it disputing. Others translate it as strife. And so there's a lot going on. The literal context here in the parsha is Moses at the beginning of the book of Devarim. Moses is saying, let me take us back and say how we got here. And part of how we got here is I needed to go ahead and appoint lots of judges and officers because I couldn't deal with it myself. But there's a context as well in this case that he's referring to the fact that only with divine help was he able to sort of keep the people together with these types of behaviors. Rashi explains, he sort of breaks down the 3 things, torchachem, masachem, rivchem. And he says, that torchachem, I'll paraphrase, he basically can be summarized as extending rather than limiting disputes. He says, you're in court and you're about to lose and you make the dispute bigger instead of you try to get more judges or appeal or bring more witnesses when the dispute was presented. And what would be good social order is to take the L, right? Take the loss, if that's what's going to happen. And instead, you extend rather than limit disputes. Masachem, your burden. This teaches that the people were epikorsim, he says, and this is explained that they treated the judges, officials, with scant respect. So if Moshe went forth early from his tent, they would say, why does the son of Amram leave so early? Perhaps he's not at ease at home. And if he left late, they would say, what do you think? He's sitting and devising evil schemes against you and is plotting against you. And this can be summarized basically as gossip in order to take down or lessen the honor of communal authority. So we have extending disputes, and gossiping in a way that targets communal authority, what we would colloquially call hating. They were hating on Moshe. Rivchem, your strife. And this teaches that, Rashi says, that they were always contentious, right? This means, so I would say this is the quarreling with each other. They were always just fighting. And Ibn Ezra explains similarly, he says, your strife refers to with one another. So we can see the connection between our Parsha and Haftarah and the current period of the 3 weeks and the 9 days. Both Devarim and Eicha may represent rebuke, and in our Parsha specifically, Moshe rebukes the people for having strife with one another and for undermining the social order. As I noted, the period of 3 weeks is one where we're cautioned both to avoid dangerous activities and situations, but also, I should mention that it's a time to be particularly careful regarding interpersonal relations, to avoid creating division and strife among the Jewish people. This connects us back more or less, I should say, and this is obviously connected to the traditional reason for the destruction of the first temple. And this connects us back more or less to where we left off in Eicha Rabbah, in the context of the risks during Bein HaMetzarim, this 3-week period. And in the midrash that follows, we find a powerful allegory. Rabbi Abahu was sitting and studying in a synagogue in the area of Caesarea. He saw a certain person who was carrying a stick and going to strike another person. He saw a demon standing behind him carrying an iron rod. Rabbi Abahu stood and called out to the man with the stick and said to him, "Why do you seek to kill your counterpart? Why are you trying to kill this other man?" And the man said to him, "Can a person kill another with this little stick?" And so Rabbi Abahu said to him, "There's a demon standing behind," and it seems to mean standing behind you, but it's a little ambiguous, that is carrying an iron rod. You strike him with this stick, and it will strike with that iron rod, and he will die. So Rabbi Yochanan would instruct teachers of Bible and teachers of Mishnah not to raise a strap to children during those days. And Rabbi Shmuel Bar Nachmani would further instruct the teachers of Bible and the teachers of Mishnah to dismiss the children during those 4 hours. That is the beginning of the 6th to the end of the 9th halachic hour, when we have this sort of midday heat and bad luck. We see from this midrash that there are times when what otherwise would be not great, harmful, normal actions may be fatal due to forces beyond the intentions or control of the actor. The Midrash is focusing on magnification of physical harm. A non-deadly instrument becomes a deadly instrument when a malevolent force magnifies the blow. I think that it applies equally to how we treat each other verbally and emotionally. I also see in this warning that an ordinary stick may cause as much harm as an iron rod, somewhat of a parallel to the halachic concept of the shor mu'ad, a forewarned ox. Without going into too much detail here, the basic concept is that the liability for the harm caused by a shor tam, a docile or presumptively docile ox, is lower, because you don't expect that ox to do harm, and so the level of culpability in society, is lower. Or ordinarily, we let the oxen go about, and we don't have to worry that it's going to be ruinous liability if they do something, because people's oxen need to go about. But after the ox has gored 3 times before, its owner is put on notice that the ox is dangerous, and the owner's liability is then increased, becomes this shor mu'ad. So too does the Midrash try to forewarn us that our actions during this time, Bein HaMetzarim, when bad things are in the air, can be more harmful than we intend them to be. This is another reason for the extreme caution we should exercise in interpersonal relations during this period. This lesson is directly applicable to the period of the 3 weeks, and in particular the 9 days where we find ourselves now. That period will soon be over, and we will be a short late summer break before the season of repentance starts in Elul. Elul is coming, it will be here, it's almost here. But I would like to suggest that we might draw a further parallel between the caution in what we say and do during this traditionally inauspicious time, and how careful we should also be in what we say and do in another time of danger, times when the society we live in is under significant stress, when the social bonds are fraying and trust is low. And we're living in those times, I think, and they're unlikely to end this coming Monday. In these times as well, our society can be like a powder keg. And when we know that this is happening and that small disputes or microaggressions or whatever they might be, which should be insignificant, are in fact causing friendships to end and even physical violence, perhaps we're on notice, like the owner of the ox in Bava Kama or the man holding the stick in the Midrash, that we cannot fully control the harm that our otherwise ordinary missteps may cause. Shabbat Shalom.